I taught my son to value the truth, and he returned it to me when I was too afraid to see it myself. His small hands held the phone that showed the screen where my past was falling apart. In that moment, I realized, our children see everything. And even when we are too tired to keep fighting, they believe in us more than we believe in ourselves. And for them, we have to stand up, even when the ground is shaking under our feet. The road stretched out ahead of us like some cruel joke, flat and endless, the early April sun flashing across the windshield in a rhythm that made my eyes ache. Lizzie insisted we spend Easter weekend with her parents, dragging our 2 kids along like we were some picture-perfect family out of a store-bought frame. I gripped the wheel tighter, pretending not to notice how both of them, heads bent over their phones, hadn't looked out the window once since we pulled out of the driveway. Mike in the back seat was battling some pixelated monster while Emma giggled at whatever nonsense streamed across her screen. Lizzie sat beside me, scrolling through her own phone like her life depended on it, occasionally tossing out a reminder about traffic or directions as if the GPS wasn't already screaming at me. We should have made them put the phones away for the drive, I said, keeping my voice light, knowing full well that would start a fight. She didn't even glance up, just murmured something about letting them have their fun. It's a holiday, she said, as if that excused everything. Right, because nothing says family bonding like ignoring each other for 4 straight hours. Somewhere outside of town, when the third shriek of electronic gunfire blasted through the car, I snapped. That's it, I said, snatching Mike's phone out of his hand like a bear stealing a fish. He howled like I'd taken a lung. Emma immediately followed suit, and within seconds the back seat turned into a full-scale uprising. Lizzie finally looked up, wide-eyed, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Give it back, David, she said sharply, her nails clicking against her screen as she typed some furious message. That did it. I twisted in my seat just enough to yank Emma's phone too, dodging her flailing arms like I was in some kind of low-rent action movie. Both kids screamed bloody murder. Lizzie's voice climbed into that octave only reserved for when she was truly furious, and for a second, the whole car vibrated with the sound of our collective dysfunction. I should have just turned up the radio and let the chaos drown itself out, but no, I had to open my big mouth. If they can't handle being without their phones for a few hours, maybe we're doing something wrong, I said, shooting Lizzie a look that could have set her hair on fire. She huffed, typing furiously again, her nails a blur over the glass. That's when Mike, red-faced and breathing hard like he'd just lost a round in a heavyweight match, shouted the words that cracked the whole miserable scene wide open. If you're taking our phones, he yelled, take hers too. He jabbed a furious finger at Lizzie, who froze mid-text. She's been texting all day, he went on, his voice cracking, and I saw it, Dad. I saw the messages. There was a kiss emoji. The kind you send to boyfriends and girlfriends. For a split second, the only sound in the car was the thrum of the tires on the asphalt. Lizzie's hand hovered over her phone like she was thinking about throwing it out the window. My stomach dropped somewhere past my shoes. I glanced over, catching the way her face paled under her makeup, the way her thumb frantically swiped at the screen as if she could somehow delete whatever digital footprints she'd left behind. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Mike kept going, the dam bursting wide open, fueled by weeks, maybe months, of watching and waiting. She's always texting, he said, his voice smaller now, almost scared. At night, when she thinks we're asleep, when you're in the shower, all the time. He sank back into his seat, his anger spent, staring out the window with a look I'd never seen on him before. Lizzie finally spoke, her voice tight and strained, telling him he didn't know what he was talking about, that it was just her friend from work, that they were planning a surprise. But the words hung there, limp and unbelievable, wilting under the weight of too much evidence. My hands gripped the wheel hard enough to make my knuckles ache. The car seemed to shrink, the air thick and stifling. The kids fell silent, sensing something had shifted in a way none of us could pretend to ignore. Lizzie turned back to her phone, pretending to read something important, pretending she still had control. I just kept driving, each mile heavier than the last, feeling like I was barreling toward a destination none of us had ever intended to reach. By the time we pulled into Lizzie's parents' driveway, the earlier explosion in the car felt like a dull pressure in the back of my mind, not fully gone but easier to ignore under the weight of routine. I told myself not to overreact, that Mike was just frustrated, that kids say all sorts of crazy things when you take away their electronics. I convinced myself that whatever nonsense he thought he saw didn't mean anything. Lizzie and I had been through too much, scraped through rough years and storms that would have sunk most marriages. She wasn't going anywhere, not after everything we built. Her parents, Phil and Marcy, came out to greet us, all warm smiles and open arms like a postcard family. Phil clapped me on the back so hard my teeth clicked together, and Marcy immediately started fussing over the kids, exclaiming how big they'd gotten even though she had just seen them at Christmas. Lizzie seemed to slip easily into the comfort of home, smiling in that easy, polished way she had around her parents. She grabbed Emma's hand and led her inside with that upbeat voice she used when she wanted to look like the perfect daughter. I trailed behind carrying the bags, watching as Lizzie was swallowed up by the familiar chaos of her childhood kitchen. Pots clanged, Marcy issued cheerful orders, and Lizzie laughed too loudly at a story about the neighbor's dog. For a minute, it felt almost normal, but then I saw it again. The way Lizzie's hand dipped to her pocket when she thought no one was looking, her thumb flying over the screen with mechanical speed. She was half listening, half smiling, but her attention kept slipping somewhere else, somewhere not in that kitchen. I leaned against the doorway and called her out, keeping my tone casual, teasing even, about how maybe it wouldn't kill her to act like she was visiting human beings instead of her phone. She barely looked up, mumbled something about work, said she just had to answer a couple of messages because her team was organizing a surprise party for their boss's birthday next week. Very important, she said, all serious and brisk, as if arranging cake and decorations was equivalent to negotiating a peace treaty. I nodded, not because I believed her but because the alternative felt too heavy to drag out into the open while her parents were buzzing around trying to set a holiday table. I busied myself helping Phil bring chairs up from the basement, pretending not to notice Lizzie's screen lighting up again when she thought nobody would catch her. Every few minutes, she slipped away from the main conversation, sometimes standing by the window, sometimes ducking toward the hallway, her face illuminated by that little glow. Mike caught my eye once, gave me this look, a mixture of vindication and sadness, but I shook my head just a fraction, warning him not to stir anything up. The last thing we needed was another scene, not here, not now. Emma didn't seem to notice anything. She was busy helping her grandmother fold napkins into little rabbit shapes, chattering away about school and her best friend's new puppy. I envied her in that moment, the way kids could slip past the cracks without seeing how wide they really were. Lizzie's father opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving, making a big show of it like we were royalty, and I drank a little more than I usually would, letting the low burn in my throat distract me. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that Lizzie was loyal, that Mike had misunderstood, that this was just some work thing. I watched her from across the room, laughing, leaning in close to her mother, the way she always did when she felt safe. But every so often, there was a flicker. A tiny shadow that crossed her face when she glanced at her phone, a tightness around her mouth that wasn't there before. She had a secret. I felt it in my bones, the way you feel a storm coming long before the first drop hits your skin. I told myself not to ruin the night, not to jump to conclusions, not to wreck Easter over something that might be innocent. So I smiled, I poured another glass, I complimented the ham and laughed at Marcy's bad jokes. I played the part of the good husband because that's what you do when the world feels like it's shifting under your feet but you're still pretending the ground is solid. I told myself the truth could wait until tomorrow, or the next day, or maybe even forever if it had to. But somewhere deep inside, I knew. I knew that the real surprise Lizzie was planning had nothing to do with balloons or sheet cake. And when it finally came, it wasn't going to be the kind of surprise you celebrate. Mike didn't say another word about the phone after we settled in at Lizzie's parents' house, but I could see it in the way he moved, the way he watched her like a hawk, staying close without making it too obvious. He was subtle about it for a kid, sticking near her as she helped Marcy fold napkins, lingering by the kitchen counter when she went to refill drinks, pretending to rummage through a drawer just to keep her in sight. Lizzie noticed too. I could tell by the way she started putting her phone away more quickly, shoving it deep into her back pocket instead of keeping it out like before. She laughed a little louder than necessary at Phil's stories, made a big show of clinking glasses with Marcy when they finished setting the table, like she could drown out suspicion with enough noise and cheer. I told myself it was all in Mike's head, that he was overreacting because of the fight in the car, but there was a tightness under Lizzie's smile that hadn't been there before, and once you start looking for cracks, you find them everywhere. The evening rolled on with the usual chaos of family dinners, the kids half-heartedly pretending to be interested in grown-up conversations, Phil teasing me about some football game from a decade ago, Marcy passing around her famous lemon pie like it was a golden trophy. Lizzie kept the act up well enough, but she couldn't resist the pull of her phone for long. About an hour after dinner, she announced to no one in particular that she had to step outside for a minute to make a quick work call, all casual, all very normal if you didn't know better. She grabbed her phone off the counter with a practiced hand and slipped through the side door without looking back. I didn't move from my seat, partly because I didn't want to look like I didn't trust her, partly because I didn't know if I could stand up without my legs betraying me. But Mike, he was ready. He shot me a glance, quick and sharp, and then bolted out of his chair, pretending to be interested in the dessert table. I saw him edge toward the window by the side of the kitchen, the one that looked out over the yard. He popped the latch, just enough to swing it open a crack, then crouched down so no one from the yard would notice. I could hear Lizzie's voice, soft and urgent, floating through the gap. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing, pretending to fuss with a coffee cup. She was talking to someone named Joe, her voice low but clear enough in the still night air. She told him she needed some time, that things were complicated with the kids, that they had questions and she needed to figure out how to explain everything without making it worse. She said it like this was a problem they had discussed before, like they had a whole plan brewing just beneath the surface of what I thought was our life. She said they needed to find a lawyer, that she didn't want to make any rash moves without being prepared, that it was important to do this the right way. She promised she would call him later once the house settled down and the kids were asleep. My hands curled into fists under the table, not from rage but from the sheer effort it took to keep my face blank, to keep from betraying that I heard every single word. I saw Mike glance back at me, his face pale, his eyes huge, and in that moment I knew he wasn't just a kid blowing things out of proportion. He had seen it. He had heard it. And now so had I. Lizzie ended the call after a few more rushed, whispered words that I couldn't quite catch, and she slipped back inside a minute later, cheeks a little flushed from the cold, smiling too brightly, tucking her phone back into her pocket like it was just another harmless accessory. She floated back into the kitchen, laughing at something Phil said, brushing a stray hair behind her ear with a practiced casualness that made my stomach turn. I forced myself to smile, to nod, to finish my coffee like nothing had changed, but something had, something irreversible. The ground under my feet felt thinner, the air heavier, like the whole house was built on a fault line ready to split wide open. Lizzie passed behind my chair, her hand brushing my shoulder in a casual, familiar gesture, and I wondered how many more nights I would sit at a table pretending to be a husband to someone already planning her escape. I woke up the next morning with a headache that felt stitched into my skull, not from the wine but from the weight of everything I had overheard the night before. I lay there for a long time staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet creaks of the old house, and decided that one way or another, I was going to find out the truth before this weekend was over. I couldn't go on pretending, not with Mike already carrying half the burden on his young shoulders. I pulled him aside in the hallway while everyone else was busy setting up for breakfast, speaking low, careful to keep my voice steady. I asked him to help me, told him it would be simple, just watch his mother like he had before but more casually, no following her from room to room, no crouching by windows this time. Blend in, act like he didn't notice anything at all, just be nearby, keep his ears and eyes open, and then quietly tell me what he saw. Mike agreed without hesitation, his face tightening with that same stubborn little boy look I used to see when he would set his mind to finishing a puzzle or winning a race. He was loyal to the core, and he hated lies even more than I did. He promised he would be smart about it, that Lizzie wouldn't suspect anything. We agreed that he would just hang around near her when he could, pretending to play games on his tablet, pretending to be a kid lost in his own world. I told myself this was the best way, the cleanest way to get answers without blowing up Easter morning into a full-blown war zone. The house buzzed with the usual family chaos, Marcy fussing over hot cross buns, Phil fiddling with the coffee machine like he was launching a rocket, Emma darting in and out of the living room with a basket of decorations. Lizzie floated through it all with a practiced grace, helping where it was needed, laughing in the right places, but never too far from her phone, always with one hand free to check a message or answer a text. Mike did exactly what I asked, pretending to scroll through a game on the couch, sneaking glances whenever Lizzie's phone buzzed or when she stepped away from the kitchen chatter to reply. Everything was going smoothly for a while, and I tried to focus on helping Phil fix a stubborn chair leg instead of obsessively watching Lizzie out of the corner of my eye. Then it happened. Mike stiffened on the couch, his body tensing like he had just been punched in the gut. He didn't wait for subtlety, didn't wait to quietly report back like we planned. He jumped up, quick as lightning, grabbed Lizzie's phone right out of her hands before she could react, and bolted across the room toward me. His voice cracked with emotion as he shouted that he was right, that he knew he was right, and that I had to see it for myself. Lizzie's face went pale, the kind of pale that drains all the way to the lips, and she rushed after him, scolding him sharply, her voice shrill enough to make Marcy drop a fork in the kitchen. Mike skidded to a stop right in front of me, shoving the phone into my hands with a desperate, trembling grip. I caught it automatically, more from instinct than thought, and for a second the whole room seemed to freeze around me. Lizzie reached for the phone, tried to snatch it back, but I was faster. I hit the screen just as she lunged, and there it was, plain and gut-wrenching. A string of messages open in the chat window, glowing back at me like a neon betrayal. She was talking to Joe, just like I had heard the night before, but this time there was no doubt, no room for misunderstanding. The last message she sent was still hanging there, fresh and brutal. I love you so much, I can't wait until we can finally be together for real. We'll figure it out. I just need a little more time to explain things to the kids. After that, we'll find the right lawyer. My hands shook, not from rage, not yet, but from something deeper, something colder that spread through my chest like slow poison. I stared at the words, hearing the sound of Mike breathing hard beside me, hearing Lizzie still protesting, still trying to scold and shame him like he was the one who had crossed the line. I didn't say anything for a long time. I didn't shout or throw the phone or slam my fist through the wall. I just stood there, feeling the weight of everything I thought we were crashing down around me, seeing years of struggle and compromise and shared dreams crumble into dust with one single screen of text. The only thought that came to my mind, clear and aching and hollow, was why are you like this with us? The silence that filled the room after I read the messages was thick enough to choke on, broken only by Lizzie's heavy breathing and the soft clink of a dropped spoon somewhere behind me. Phil and Marcy stared at their daughter like they didn't even recognize her, their faces frozen somewhere between disbelief and disgust. Phil was the first to speak, his voice low and trembling, asking her how she could do something so shameful to her husband and to her children, how she could tear apart the very life that had been built around her. Marcy stepped closer, her hands shaking, her voice louder, angrier, demanding to know how Lizzie could betray not just me but her own family's trust, how she could look at her children every day while planning to rip their home apart for the sake of some other man. Lizzie stood there, arms crossed, her mouth twisted into something that barely resembled remorse, and told them she didn't love me anymore, that she couldn't keep living a life where she felt nothing, that Joe understood her, that he made her feel seen and appreciated in ways she claimed I never had. She said it all so calmly, so coldly, like she was describing changing a grocery store loyalty card, not detonating the lives of the people who loved her. Marcy's face crumpled as she told Lizzie she didn't want to see her anymore, that she couldn't bear to watch her own daughter turn into someone so selfish and hollow. She said she would stay with the children for now, help keep some normalcy while everything got sorted out, but she made it clear Lizzie wasn't welcome under her roof. Mike stood stiffly beside me, his little fists clenched, his jaw set like he was trying to hold himself together by sheer will. When Lizzie said she would figure out where to stay and that she would be taking the children soon enough, Mike finally spoke up, loud and clear, saying he didn't want to live with her, that he wanted to stay with me, that he didn't trust someone who could lie to their own family and smile about it. Emma, confused and teary-eyed, clung to Marcy's hand, but after a few whispered words from Mike, she nodded too, her little head bobbing with determination she probably barely understood herself. I didn't waste time after that. Lizzie filed her lawsuit within days, demanding full custody of the kids, claiming she was the better parent, that I was too rigid, too old-fashioned, that the kids would thrive better under her care. She wanted the house too, and the car, and a lion's share of the savings, painting herself as the victim in papers so thick with lies they barely resembled our life at all. But I fought back with everything I had, because I knew I wasn't fighting for possessions or pride, I was fighting for my kids, for the home we had built with our own hands, for the life that she had tried to throw away like it was some outdated piece of clothing. In court, her lawyer painted the same tired picture, claiming Lizzie deserved to start fresh with the children, that she needed the house and car to maintain stability, that she had been a devoted mother and should continue to be the primary parent. I sat there, hands folded, listening to the stories they spun, feeling the burn of anger deep in my chest but keeping my face still. Then it was Mike's turn to speak, and he stood up, his voice steady even though his hands trembled a little, and he told the judge in clear words that he didn't want to live with a mother who lied to them, that he wanted to stay with me because he knew he could trust me, because he knew I would never abandon them the way Lizzie had. He looked straight at Emma, who nodded quickly and clutched his hand so tightly it made my heart ache. The court listened, and they listened hard. They saw through the polished arguments Lizzie's lawyer presented, saw the truth written plain across the faces of two kids who just wanted stability, who just wanted someone who would stand by them without betrayal. In the end, the ruling came down hard and swift. Custody of both children was awarded to me, along with the house, the car, and full access to the savings we had built over our marriage. Lizzie was ordered to pay child support and granted visitation rights for once a week, supervised if necessary. She stood there in court, looking smaller than I had ever seen her, her perfect mask cracked and crumbling around the edges. I didn't feel triumph or joy. I felt something colder, heavier, the weight of knowing that sometimes winning feels an awful lot like losing everything you thought you knew. As we left the courthouse, Mike walking close by my side and Emma holding my hand so tightly her fingers turned white, I realized the real fight wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. Because trust once broken doesn't just heal with a court order or a judge's gavel. It takes time. It takes grit. It takes showing up every single day even when everything inside you still feels cracked. And somewhere deep down, I knew we would get there. We would rebuild. Without her.